This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.
Kia ora, and welcome to Diversity Dispatch, your local queer radio show. We're your hosts, Ricky
and Percy, and we're here to bring you the latest in Dunedin queer news, community projects, events, and more.
Sit back, relax, and tune in to our fortnightly show hosted on OAR FM.
Let's get started.
Hello.
Kia ora. Oh, goodness, I was very close to the mic there. Okay. Welcome to our next episode of Diversity Dispatch.
Yeah, what's up?
Yeah.
What's new with you?
Oh, I've just finished planning all of my tickets and transport stuff when I leave for Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
Just, in like 2.5 months, which is crazy.
Yeah.
So we're not going to think about that because, no.
Thinking's hard.
Yeah, thinking's hard, and I don't want to deal with the, yeah.
Anyway.
Anyway, happy Pride Month to
Thank
those
you.
who celebrate.
American Pride.
Yeah, no, very true, very true. So in sort of honor of, Pride Month, I thought it would be fun to go kind of explore some of the, popular discourse topics that tend to pop up. I will do like a disclaimer. This is a very terminally online sort of list of stuff.
Yeah.
So I guarantee that like 90% of actual real life queer people do not care about any of this.
Perfect.
But it's fun to, I picked ones that are like kind of like trivial, but are just like fun to discuss. So I've got like a handful and we'll see how many we can get through, and just kind of talk about like, I guess, our personal opinions about these. We'll just kind of see where the conversation goes.
Good.
All right, so let's get started. So starting off with a really nice spicy one. So the use of queer as a term or as a label. So I have several different friends that specifically don't use it for different reasons.
Yeah.
And that's very valid. I feel like it's you can call yourself what you want to call yourself,
Exactly.
like at the end of the day.
It's like, realistically, it's the community reclaiming the slur that was used against them.
100%. And if you look at like the way that other minority communities have taken steps to reclaim their own slurs, I think that it's like a really important part of, I say decolonizing, but decolonization kind of feeds into also like queer activism and queer theory too.
Yeah.
It's very much about like decolonizing the language and reclaiming what sort of, I guess, our oppressors took from us.
I would say that it's like a growing past shame.
Yes.
Like embracing the negative that has happened and then either choosing to incorporate it and, therefore lessen the hurt that can be caused by that word. Yeah,
there's like, I don't remember who said it, but there's I think it was Game of Thrones actually. There's that great line about like, if you own like the person that you are, nobody can use that against you to like hurt you.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's the kind of the whole thing of like taking something that might have been used historically to put you down and making it yours so that it becomes neutral. It's neutralized.
Exactly. Because like no one can weaponize shame against you if you don't have shame for the thing.
Yes. No, 100%. I agree. Yeah. It's interesting because I didn't grow up like in a community that used queer as a slur. I grew up in a community that used gay as a slur.
Yeah.
And so my relationship with the word gay is very similar to other people's relationship to the word queer because, it's kind of been like, oh, I was hearing this as a child like during my formative years as something that was bad and something that was like shameful.
Yeah, because like at my school and even my like older siblings would often use the word gay as like no, that's bad or that's dumb. I don't like that idea. That's gay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, exactly. And I didn't realize like what the issue was. I was such a homophobic child.
I suppose you turn into that when you become defensive. You're like, well, I've been conditioned to believe that this is bad, so I'm going to distance myself away from it as far as possible, which definitely. I think a lot of men in Dunedin can relate to.
Oh, yeah. Oh, boy. Yes. No, yeah. Especially, when you're, like, down south in the South Island where we are, it's, like, it's such a, what's the word, like, insular kind of community. And so, any kind of deviation from the norm, even if it's not, like, queer-related, is, like, no, you can't do that. So I guess it kind of feeds into, like, neurodiversity, too. But that's a whole separate discussion. All right. What about so the next one is, and this is one of my favorite ones because I will talk about this for hours, kink in Pride events.
So interesting. So I would answer that question with another question first.
Okay.
What is the purpose of Pride? Like, is Pride a protest?
Yeah.
Like, if it were a protest, then absolutely kink being involved would make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It'd be like, it's literally people showing up in full visibility saying, this is who we are.
Yeah.
This is it.
Back to that shame thing, right?
Yeah,
like kind
exactly.
of owning stuff that would like historically have been like very heavily criticized and, yeah.
But it's like now Pride has become like commodified.
Yeah.
And now like, like companies and stuff will be like, look, we like Pride, specifically within this time. Look, we have a rainbow profile picture that'll stay until the month ends. Yeah, and then when people are like, oh, we can't have kink at Pride because, children and stuff are there. It's like...
They don't know what that means.
It's like, taking children to like a protest, not as like a person like involved in it yourself, but as like to observe.
Yeah.
Which like obviously you can do, but it's like, I think that like assuming that Pride is a protest and a demonstration, that you can sort of just be like, all right, kids, so there may be some interesting things that you end up seeing. That's not necessarily what we're going for, but, just keep an open mind. Also, I think a lot of people don't give children enough credit for understanding what they're saying. Because, like, the amount of, like, swearing for kids and stuff, when they're like, oh, you can't say that word. It's like, but you say it. You say it every day. You say it multiple times a day. Yeah, but I'm an adult. It's like,
why?
Are you saying that because I'm a child that I lack the capability of understanding that some words are for specific situations and carry like a bigger, heavier meaning? It's like, yeah, that's weird. Swearing with kids is weird, I think.
No, but I 100% agree with you as well, though, because, I mean, I know that not every queer person necessarily would agree with this, but I think that, the being queer is inherently political until we have 100% not just like equal rights, but equitable rights, It's going to be political until we get to that point.
Yeah.
And it should honestly be political after that point too. And so it's kind of this whole thing of like, why are we removing the, sort of extreme, in quotes, extreme or like, very, very on the fringe alternative sections of the queer community just to make the rest of the people feel comfortable. Like that's defeats the whole purpose of protest, right? And
also like another, like touching on that exact same thing, like in America, drag at the moment is like it's under debate for a lot of different reasons. Yep. So it's almost like the same thing. Like, is drag allowed at Pride? Because then people who are like, oh no, drag, blah, like they, like the Pride event, assuming that this is like a parade, they might get a weird taste in their mouth. But it's like, there's probably already a weird taste in their mouth to begin with if that's what is doing it for them. Yeah,
I remember seeing a tweet somewhere, and I do want to research this and check that it's historically accurate because I'm not 100% sure, so disclaimer. But it was talking about how like historically people would use the no kink at Pride sort of argument to arrest like trans people in public, for example, or people who are cross-dressing or drag queens and stuff like that, like especially during like kind of the 80s, which was like the height of the queer movement. And so people would use the same arguments that we are using today to justify like violence and oppression against, in particular, like drag performers and trans people.
Yeah.
And so it always kind of makes me feel a little bit weird when people are like, oh, we shouldn't be doing this, we shouldn't be doing that. Why are we policing what other people want to celebrate Pride for,
It's like, I think we need to figure out what the essence, what the message behind having Pride at all is for. And it's for visibility.
Yes.
And it's for authenticity.
Yeah.
So it's like if people are like, oh, yeah, you can be authentic, just show up looking this way so that you don't make us normies uncomfortable. It's like, or maybe just don't come.
Yeah, like you can pander to the straight people for as long as you want, but they're still not going to accept you just because you're a good gay,
Yeah.
Like it's the whole thing of like we need to actually be coming together as a community regardless of our like differences, because when we separate each other, that's how like fascist governments basically get into place, right?
We need to figure out who the real enemy is, and that enemy is Capitalism
and straight people. No, I'm kidding. But also, okay. What about? So this is a fun one. This is definitely more sort of online spaces, but like micro labels, neo-pronouns, and it's like pronouns and stuff like that.
Ladies and gentlemen, to the stage, neo-pronouns.
That's really good. Actually, I love that. I mean, I don't care. I wouldn't personally use any of those, but that's just my own preference.
What are the?
So micro labels are like I'm demi-fluid flux something, that type of thing. So it's like kind of narrowing down the sexuality label until it's like a very specific kind of experience.
Oh, okay.
I think it popped up more when like sort of asexual became a more used sort of term online, and so there were a lot of different versions of like asexuality that could sort of be explored. I don't know, like I was a big micro labels girly back in the day because I think that they do serve a purpose and that they help you kind of figure out exactly what your boundaries are when it comes to relationships and interacting with other queer people and what you do and don't want in a relationship with somebody. But I do also think that like, and this is just my opinion, I do think it's something that you kind of, as you get older, I wouldn't say you necessarily grow out of, but you kind of become less concerned with the specificity of labels and it turns into like, oh, I'm just queer.
Yeah, because it's like, I suppose, do you necessarily need, like, when somebody asks, like, what is your sexuality? Do you need that person to know each and every little detail about you in that space without you even deciding whether or not you're interested in pursuing that type of, like, relationship with that person or not? So it's like, I can see for some people it could be empowering.
Yeah.
For me personally, I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose my sexuality is pretty open and shut, I would say. So, yeah, but I'm sure for like people who are asexual, especially, that could be really helpful.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and for me, it's always kind of had the vibe of like when people will on social media when they'll post like a list of all of their different like diagnoses and the list of all of their triggers and stuff, and I'm like, okay, I understand like the positives behind that, but at the end of the day, people online are awful, and you know, you're
giving them ammo.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, honestly, I want to be a hermit. I want to be like as invisible as possible online at all times. I do not want people to interact with me, and so I don't want to add more fuel to sort of the fire and that sort of thing. But at the same time, like, if people want to do that and they want to be really open about it, great. I think that's awesome, and we definitely need to sort of destigmatize the use of micro labels and things like that. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's definitely complicated, but I feel like with a lot of these like takes, at the end of the day, it's just like stop policing other people and let people do what they want.
Literally, if somebody explains to you what would make them more comfortable and you choose not to follow that, even if like it doesn't impact you whatsoever, you're just like, I don't really like that.
Yeah,
it's
or
like,
I don't agree with that. Okay, what are you, a cop? Like, calm
it's
down.
Like, whether you disagree or not, this person's like, it would make me feel real like a human if you would, just use this one teeny little word before addressing me.
Yep. Plus, with like the huge kind of, I guess, intersection between neurodiversity and like queer identity, there's a lot of people who actually really like having the option of picking like a really specific label because it's like, yes, I can categorize things really nicely into these really neat little boxes. And I think that kind of circling back to like queer as a slur and that kind of thing, I think that, these really broad terms, I was talking to, I think, Ash the other day about this, these really broad terms scare people because they do not specify what we are. So like when you say I'm genderqueer, for example, that could mean non-binary, it could mean trans, it could just mean that you wear gender non-conforming clothing.
If you're saying that label to a person who is interested in you, they would have more follow-up questions being like, oh, are you compatible in this way?
Yeah.
I mean, that makes sense, but also I suppose that opens up a dialogue.
No, 100%. I think that the ambiguity is actually a really powerful tool to encourage people who may not necessarily be involved with the community to ask more questions and to become more educated and aware of like how the community works, I guess. Yeah. Let's just trying to find. Okay. This is a good one, actually. Queer baiting in media, and like when does it become queer baiting, and when is it actually just people aren't required to disclose their sexualities in public?
Well, the thing is, if because like in like media, when creators label a certain, like when they make the characters' relationships very black and white.
Yeah.
If it's labeled as queer, then like the success of the film is therefore like all of a sudden they're much worse just because people are like, oh, there's a queer. Yeah. So then they sort of counter that by including the relationship, but doing it in a way where you likely won't see it unless you're specifically looking for it or have experienced these things.
Yeah.
But obviously there are also just blatant queer baiting, but they're like, oh, we'll get the queer community to advertise this if we do it in this way.
Yes. Yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah, so I would say it's a problem, but like...
Yeah, I mean, I think, for those who may not be familiar with the term queer baiting, it's basically a phenomenon that happens in like media where characters are, I guess, heavily implied to be queer or like, have queer identities, but it's never explicitly mentioned so that like the production company can gain all of the like, I guess, financial revenue from queer people watching the show without having to prevent it from being advertised in places like the Middle East or in China. Yeah. It's literally just like capitalism.
It's just like, it's the kind of nuances that only a neurodivergent person who's like intently watching being like, oh my God, wait, his hand just touched his knee. But they're meant to be friends. But are they friends?
Ooh, yeah, exactly. I think that also like there's a long kind of history, especially with I guess like AFAB people and women in particular engaging with content that might have been previously kind of very like male dominated. Like I'll use like I guess Star Wars, Star Trek is a really good example because Spock and Kirk was like the first like ship, I guess, that ever existed in like modern media. And so there's a really strong correlation between I guess like using queer baiting as a tool to make more money and pandering to a predominantly female audience because they tend to be the people who, I guess, theorize about the characters the most and then engage with the most content. And then they kind of companies will turn around and be like, oh, well, they're not actually queer. We didn't have this whole time. You women are just like crazy. And it's like, and it's sort of this misogynistic thing that feeds into itself and like perpetuates. Yeah.
But it's also just like, just because you are the creator of this series, does that mean that you therefore can put like a prison cell around it and be like, nobody can further the story in any way possible, even if it's not for profit and even if whatever. It's
exactly.
Like, no, when people fall in love with your art and your media, they're making up additional stories. It's a gift, babe.
We don't need permission from the creators. What is this, like Catholicism? We don't need to get permission from the people who made it to like, add a new thing to it. Like, death of the author. Once it's out in the open, it's anybody's
public domain, baby.
Yeah, no, 100%. Let's see. Here's one that I really hate. The whole grouping non-binary people and women like in the same group. So they'll be like, oh yeah, like this is a support group open to women and non-binary people. And so they really just mean non-binary people who were assigned female at birth and look like woman light, basically, I hate that.
I suppose I've not been excluded from that type of environment because I'm neither. But I see what you mean. There was a TikTok I saw once, and it was like it was like these girls taking the piss out of like woke people, being like, "Hey, can you tell me where the non-binary bathroom for girls is?"
Yeah, it's like, are you a girl non-binary or a boy non-binary?
Yeah,
and I'm like, congratulations, babe, you reinvented the binary system. Like, I don't know what to tell you.
Oh my God, is that a micro?
Is that a micro? Yeah, no, 100%. I hate that because I think also like, I don't know. Like I understand like the need to create specific spaces for specific people because obviously there are certain subsections of every minority community that experience higher levels of like bigotry and oppression.
Yeah.
And that's just we know this. But I don't know because I feel like
Because the common, sorry to interrupt, the common link that they are like facing is oppression from men.
Yes.
So it's like they're basically like, we want to create a group of everyone who sort of could be understood as being a woman.
Yeah.
So that we can sort of, come together and discuss or whatever. So like I get what they're going for, but to be like non-binary people, specifically ones that look like women, is probably like.
Because then also, like, if we're going with the sort of like we need to create a space for people who experience, oppression from like cisgender men, that includes trans men as well and trans women and like several other sort of subsections of the queer community too. So it's like, okay, cool. Why are we? Yeah, I don't know. It feels like one of those things where it's conservatism like repackaged into like a liberal kind of like thing so that they can seem like they're really onto it and really like, I guess, woke, but
by excluding certain parts of the non-binary experience.
Yeah, like you have to be ready for a very masculine presenting person to rock up because non-binary doesn't have a look.
And also just because somebody is mask presenting doesn't mean that they don't also get oppressed by the common enemy.
Exactly, 100%. Yeah, no, and like once again, it kind of comes back to the whole like we need to be focusing on community rather than like, sort of petty, divisive stuff that ultimately doesn't really impact. Yeah, it's like the coming back to like the TERF idea of like, of sex segregated spaces. It's like, okay, who is that serving? Because predators are going to be predators regardless of what they identify as or what space they're in.
Yeah.
So why are we like, making spaces with the assumption that it can only be this one particular group of people?
True that.
Just checking the time. We got about 5 minutes, so I think we might do like one more. Let's see. I'm trying to find one that's kind of more relevant to cops at pride events.
No.
Absolutely not. No, I don't care if you, I mean, I personally don't even want cops out of uniform at pride events, but that's my own opinion. And I realize that not everybody necessarily is that kind of extreme in terms of their like anti-cop stuff.
Have you seen in Queenstown the rainbow police car?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, well, it's like, and then obviously, like if there's drag performance or whatever, they're like, why don't you get a photo with the police car? It's like, well, I don't see how this benefits my community. Only y'all. Because like, just because there's one rainbow car does not mean that all police officers over the entire country, therefore, aren't going to abuse queer people.
Yeah, 100%. Plus, like, regardless of any individual person's experience with individual cops, the system of police as like an organization is inherently rooted in colonial violence and racism.
Yeah.
So even if you've never personally experienced any negative like stuff with the police, and maybe you've even had like a good relationship with the police, and that's fine, but that doesn't take away from the fact that the system is inherently exploitative, right? Like, no cops at pride. And then you think about also like when they bring out the rainbow cars, like, okay, cool, that's my like tax money that's being funded into this like performative stuff.
Exactly, that's what it is. It's virtue signaling.
100%.
It's not actual, like, it's not helpful.
Yeah. It's like, cool, what are cops doing to protect queer communities? What are they doing to keep trans people from experiencing violence?
Exactly.
Blah, blah, blah,
it's like, outside of Pride, pardon me.
Okay.
Outside of Pride, what are the police officers doing to protect trans women of colour?
Yep.
Like, they're not banding around them being like, hey, leave this person alone.
Yeah.
I mean, depending on where you are, they might be doing that.
Right.
But that would likely be somewhere like Wellington and Auckland, if that even happens.
Yeah. And like, as I've said, like to people before, like, because my mom does a lot of like trauma work with police a lot just because of her job. And so we have a lot of discussions about like kind of police as an institution. And I'm like, at the end of the day, police don't stop crimes from being committed. They arrest you after the crime has been committed.
Yeah.
So actually it's first responders and like community support groups that are the ones that prevent crime. So if we really want to be like supporting queer people, then the money that usually goes to cops should really be going into these other very, very like overstressed and overworked groups of people that are providing that support. Yeah.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. I have a lot of spicy takes about cops. I just so we're just about to run out of time because I started the timer a little bit late. So we will probably wrap this one up. But yeah, thank you very much for all of your opinions, and I'm glad that we are kind of on the same page.
No worries. Oh my God, imagine if we were like vastly different. I was like, I love cops.
I love cops. Actually, I don't think kink should ever be at Pride ever. I'll be like, okay.
I don't think kink should exist.
I'm like, oh, okay.
Only missionary. No.
Okay, we're only lights off. You know how it is.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in, and we will catch you in the next one.
Bye-bye.
Bye. And that's a wrap for today. Diversity Dispatch airs fortnightly on Thursdays at 5 p.m. So if you like today's episode, then be sure to join us in a couple of weeks for the next installment on OAR FM.
And check out the podcast on oar.org.nz and your favourite podcast platforms. Tune in for more chill chats, fun facts, and upcoming local events on Diversity Dispatch.
This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.